Okay. So welcome to Language Through Content. So this one is for teachers and administrators, specialists. It's for everyone. It's about practical ways to help EAL learners. And in the last session I did on leading a learning community, I referred to a teacher observation rubric that talked about some of the things that could be utilized as scaffolds and supports. And this one's going to go through very specific examples of all of those. So it's a lot more hands-on and practical. So welcome everyone to this session. I'm Dr. Kathy Salmon. I've introduced myself before, but I'm an educational consultant who works for the Alberta Professional Learning Consortium. I'm a sessional instructor at the U of C as well. I'm a retired school principal, and I've been seconded to Alberta Education a couple of times now. So that's been exciting. And I'm just freelancing right now. I heard that I don't need to do the land acknowledgement because you guys have done it at the start of this session. So I'm going to just take a moment to think about the land. I've got Rawson Lake behind me, so I'm always enjoying that view. And I was connected to the land out mountain biking in a beautiful forest this morning. So hopefully you've all had some great summer connected to the land where you are. This session is a practical one about acquiring tools for your teacher toolkit to support differentiated instruction for your EAL learners at their different proficiency levels. So we're going to use information through their proficiency on the benchmarks to inform instruction. We're going to talk about vocabulary and language structures. And we are going to plan for explicit language teaching within the instructional cycle, thinking about listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And high impact vocabulary strategies and sentence strategies. So we're really going to narrow it down. And this relates to TQS 3, demonstrating a professional body of knowledge, and TQS 4, establishing inclusive learning environments. So I did this one yesterday, but for those of you who did it, I only had 3 questions, so there's some more. If you were with me yesterday, the extra questions are: how many words will students come across in their textbooks in K-12? How many words are in the English language? And how large is an average adult's vocabulary? So if you're new to this session, you can answer questions 1, 2, and 3. How many words do students know when they enter kindergarten? How many words do students know when they graduate high school? And how many words do students need to learn each year? And you can just put your answers in the chat. Okay, Jay Hill is going with 3 to 5,000, 1,000 or 10,000. Any other adventurers in some answers? Yeah, some big numbers out there. Okay. So, how many words do kids know when they enter kindergarten? About 5,000. Again, give or take, depending on the background and if whether the child's been in a high literacy rich or high oral language family. But 5,000 is the average. Kids might have been exposed to 10,000 or more words receptively through literature and other interactive experiences. Again, it depends on the background. So you can see right away after 5 years, it can range quite significantly how many words kids have been exposed to. And these studies have been done on English speaking environments in English. And I don't know if it transposes directly to other languages. Some languages it would and some it wouldn't, because different languages have different amounts of words, but you can get potential extrapolations. And then I always skip to number 3 before we answer number 2, because kids learn between 3,000 and 3,500 words each year. And when you Google this question, you'll see anything from 2,500, 3,000, 3,500. That's kind of the average as you look at the questions. So there's different sources, but so I always like 3,000 is an easy number to work with. So 3,000 times 12 years of schooling is 36,000, plus the 5,000 words from kindergarten, 41,000 at high school. Of course, it can go up to that 50,000 word range, which is pretty cool. But what I think is also really neat is that they come across 88,000 words. So they'd be coming across double what their working vocabulary would be, which of course makes sense. You're going to be exposed to a lot more words than you're going to retain necessarily, but that exposure is really, really high. And then some of you get some big numbers for how many words in the English language. And there are about 500,000 lexemes in the English language. And when you define lexeme, it's like a unit of word. So it's a lexical unit of language consisting of one word or several words. It can be applied to a family of words related to by form or meaning. So that lexeme, like know, unknown, knowledgeable, knowledge. So know, that is that lexeme. And then how large is an average adult's vocabulary? About 42,000 lexemes. So we talked about an average adult, one of the studies I had is that grade 8, right? So that's about 30,000 words. So 42,000 lexemes, 30,000 words. So that is why the Calgary Sun is written at a grade 8 level. And the Calgary Herald is a little bit higher level academically. So keeping in mind those word numbers, we want to start thinking about the kids in your class. And of course, there's going to be a range, and there's going to be a range of proficiency. And on our benchmarks, we have AB level, emerging literacy. This is the levels 1 to 6. And you're looking at beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And depending on the grade you teach, a beginner might be a level B, and an intermediate might be a level 1 and 2, and your advanced is level 3 if you're in grades 2 and 3. But those numbers slightly change. So what's a beginner, intermediate, and advanced changes on this scale depending on the division in grade you teach. So just keep that in mind. Advanced is no longer synonymous with level 5. It's we've just indicated a level, and that developmentally we'd expect a student to get to about level 3 at the end of grade 3, and we'd expect a student to get to the end of level 4 by the end of grade 6 to be considered an EAL learner. And so I've just mapped the words in this chart onto the benchmark so you get an idea of the words. And this is just for you to start thinking, because today we're going to talk about vocabulary supports and differentiation. And so if you understand this range of words, when you're starting to pick tools and resources, and you're teaching, for example, grades 4 to 6, you've got some intermediate students. So you're going to be looking at that 8 to 10,000 word range when you're looking for resources that these kids can access versus the advanced level at 23,000 words. So that's quite a jump in words. So that's where understanding this and then understanding what you're going to focus in on and the supports and scaffolds that the kids need is really, really important. So keep this in mind. I didn't show you this chart yesterday. This is from Dr. Hetty Rusing. And what it shows is the typical expectation we have for kids when they go to school. So on the vertical axis is reading comprehension achievement, and on the bottom is years of schooling. And what we expect is grade 1, you're reading at a grade 1 level. Grade 5, you're reading at a grade 5 level. So that's that diagonal line going all the way up. That's the typical expectation. And for EAL learners who are learning and acquiring the language, there's typically a gap between their grade level and their reading comprehension. And so when you study EAL learners, there is that trajectory where their comprehension isn't commensurate with their grade. And so we want to do a lot of vocabulary building and a lot of work in reading so we can close that gap, which is totally possible. So in order for you to feel what it's like to be an EAL learner, I have an example of an activity called blah blah. And yesterday we talked about social and academic language and the difference between the two. So if you're just joining us today, there's a distinction between social and academic language. And I want you to read this one-page article and you can understand the difference between the two. So you will see as you start reading this, there are two major blah blah, a blah 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 blah. That must be blah 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 by second blah 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 learners. Jim Cummins has blah blah blah, these basic interpersonal blah 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 BICs or conversational blah blah blah. You get the idea. When you're a beginner, it sounds a lot like Charlie Brown's teacher. Mwah, 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 mwah. You don't understand it. Think about yourself being at an international airport where you might not understand the language, and all of a sudden you hear a word on the PA that you actually know. Calgary or Vancouver. You hear a word you recognize because the rest of it just sounds like noise. So when you're a beginner, it's really, really hard to pick out words you know and understand. Now the green words have come in. When you're an intermediate and you have a few more words, now some more of the words start to fill in. Still not enough for you to necessarily understand this text. So because I'm a good decoder and I can read this text, even as a beginner, I still can't understand all the words. So that's one of the things to recognize as a teacher. When their kids can decode, great, that's good you have that skill, but do a comprehension check and see what they understand so that you can adjust the reading to their understanding level. Now it's filled in with orange. It's a high intermediate. So now more and more of the text is filled in. Almost the entire text is now filled in. Now this kiddo can access the text with a bit of support. They have enough of the context to figure out what this text is all about. It's the rule of thumb with reading. 95% understanding is at the independent level, 90% is at the instructional level, and 85% is at the frustrational level. That's the kind of standard rule of thumb, when people do the 5-finger check about what you understand. So this text you could work with this kid, a kid at this level. And even advanced kids may still have some words they might be familiar, but they still need some support in understanding all of the words. So those are the red words. I still might need to do some instruction or some explanation about some of the words to even advanced kids or English only speakers. So this little blah, blah, blah text just gives you an idea of what it's like to be reading a text when you're a language learner. And it's a language shock activity, but it's a language shock in English because I'm not proficient enough in my other languages that I'm speaking to give you it in person. And how I level the text is I use this text profiler called LexTutor, and that's how I got the words based on the word bands that they were given on LexTutor. I just want to show how I came up with what I picked for which one. I'm not going to go through all of these slides because of time, but this big, huge PowerPoint that you have access to, Irene's put the link in the comments. You can go back and refer to it, but I think everybody has a general understanding about a beginner, the characteristics. I've also got a little chart about some of the challenges that beginners might have, and then on to intermediates. They've got some more language, but they're still acquiring, and they've got some basic structures. They've got different skills. And then they might also still have expanding vocabulary needs. They might need some support with collocations, words that go together, synonyms, those kind of things. So they still are acquiring language and need some support. And then advanced as well, they've got more and more language, but they're still experimenting and learning. So we still need to support our advanced and our English only speakers because everybody is learning 3,000 words a year. English only speakers are too. So we need to be helping everybody expand their language. So it's that fine tuning of word choices, that figurative language, the nuances, this precise vocabulary use. So there's lots of things we can still do. So here's a little easy activity to do. You can do it in the chat box. Put them in order, beginner, intermediate, and advanced with the numbers. So read the reading sentences and then put them in order of beginner, intermediate, advanced, and the same for writing, and put that in the chat box. You can all recognize these easily. You can just put an R and then your numbers and then a W and then your numbers in the order of beginner, intermediate, advanced. Yes, 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 and yes. Everybody's got it right. And this is what I like to say to teachers. You can all do this. You all recognize a beginner, an intermediate, and advanced. So keep trusting your intuition and look at the overt things. And then now you're going to use this to guide your differentiation. So trust in your subject area knowledge and be aware of the language of the context you teach in order to teach it. So most teachers can recognize beginner, intermediate, and advanced. So now it's what do I do about it? So what we're going to go through today is know your learners, identify the language, prepare for the tasks, and then select appropriate scaffolds and supports. So knowing your learners. So one of the things is really taking ownership of I've got a beginner in my class or I've got an advanced kid in my class and I'm going to do something about it versus the one size fits all lesson is really trying one or two things each day to make a difference for these kids. So what I normally do in a workshop is you pull up your class list and you mark down beginner, intermediate, and advanced, or what you know about the kids or the proficiency you're using. So some of you may have your class list already, some of you may not. But once you get there, this is, start a classroom profile list. I just talked about this in the other session. You can see on the bottom of this picture, my entire school, all 36 classes had a tab. Everybody had a profile. My teacher spent 2 months gathering baseline information. So we color coded it. So then we were planning to teach the kids in differentiated, but we needed to know their levels first, and we need to know the reading levels and all that stuff so that we can then start differentiating instruction. We would just add on to this data throughout the year. So we had this information as an entire school. We all entered our information on the same document. It didn't get messed up. Everybody was good. And there was a tab for each class. So when I was a principal going to principal meetings, then we started talking about the classes, I could pull up this information at any time, which was fantastic, and know where the students were at. When January comes around and the report cards are in, we updated it with additional information, and then we started looking at the kids' rate of progress. And then we decided, oh, we're going to change a group here because we need to help this kiddo move along. This kiddo's doing great. They're moving out of the supported class or the sheltered group, and now they're going to be in the inclusive classroom. So we moved kids around according to how they were doing. So we would check in, measure our data again, look at it again, and then make adjustments with programming and instruction. So we really use data live to guide our work. So the first step in all of this is knowing your classes. So we looked at reading, decoding, comprehension, writing vocabulary, writing sentence structure, and we used the MIPI number, sense, and shape and space as our instruction or as our baseline assessments. And then in the middle of the year, we used not Acadians, but Dibbles. And then we also used their math score on their report card because we only did the MIPI once. So we looked at their math report card score and a couple of the outcomes. So as we went through the year, we looked at what data we had. We didn't always retest everything. We were very efficient with our data gathering, and we piloted all of this kind of stuff so that we were the most effective and efficient as a school. And then you can see when now I'm planning for some of my learning, if I've got 7 beginners, level 1, level 2 in my class, and then I've got 12 intermediates, and then I've got 3 advanced kids. Of course, the class had another 6 kids in it, but they weren't EAL. So, but this is the 22 EAL learners. So then this is what I would use to help me program and design lessons with the teachers. So this is the information you need to know first. So if you just think about, I'm going to probably have beginners, intermediate, and advanced. And when you think about EAL in an inclusive classroom, I'd also look at the other kiddos. What's this kiddo like? What's this kiddo like? What are my kind of groups of kids, and what are the ones that I might have 1 or 2 kids that are distinctive? And I just want to be aware of my class when I'm designing a unit of instruction. So awareness of kids first, and then the next step is identifying the language of the content. So in this slide deck, I've got a number of learning outcomes. And I talked about this in my last session. One of the number one things you can do as a teacher is be really clear and put your learning intention up on the board or the whiteboard, whatever. So the kids and you all know what we're doing today and why. And sometimes that learning intention is something you're exploring for a week or more, and sometimes it changes each day, but really important that it helps focus the lesson. Because when we're tagging on a language intention, it's connected to the learning intention. So I'm not just doing everything about animals. It's very specific. I'm learning about the animal life cycle and that order. So that's going to lend itself to language in particular. So why EAL is hard and why it's difficult is because we're focused on the language of the learning. So you have to identify your outcome first. So then we can now narrow down and really be specific on the language these kiddos need to support them in their learning of the concept. So for example, here, these are the different types of animal life cycles and then the stages. And then here's an example of a sentence frame. And what maybe a beginner would need as a support, an intermediate and advanced. So we're all on the same topic. We're all doing animal life cycles, but the supports and the scaffolds might be different, and my expectations for the kids' language use might be different. So I've got a bunch of different examples that you can scroll through. We won't go through all of them, but even in math, there's so much oral language and automaticity in math. The one thing I say to teachers, because a lot of our EAL learners, not all, but a lot of them are very, very good at math and the calculations. It's the language of math and the automaticity and speaking like a mathematician. So I just say, add in talking, add in where they're orally saying it, add in the requirement to write your answer out in a sentence in your math journal. Add in those little things that are easy. You don't have to plan a lot for them. You just have to say them and expect them and get the kids to do it to help get that language rich environment and get the kids speaking like a mathematician. But math has, every single subject has so much specific language. So this is just an example. When you start looking at it, it's like math has a lot of language too. And so there's a lot of opportunities for kids to practice that while they're solving problems, working on equations, all those kinds of things. And this is just an example in place value. And again, this one just shows something that you could have as a visual or an anchor chart. You've done a lesson on these, but now do you have a visual up there to support the kids as they're now working through their problems on their own? You're walking around the classroom, you expect to hear them saying less than, greater than, equal to. You want them to say it along with the numbers and automatizing those. And then again, what am I going to expect my beginner, intermediate, and an advanced student to sound like? So 3 is less than 5, right? The number 3 is smaller than the number 5 for an intermediate. In this comparison, 3 is less than 5, indicating that 3 has a lower value. So again, depending on the proficiency of the kid, maybe that was a little too advanced for a grade 5er, but you get the idea of what they might sound like when they're speaking. This is a social studies example. Again, the time and place, and this is about landforms and waterways, geography, and all of the language associated with that. It's a great thing for language learners because there's also physical and visuals to go with it. And again, what would you expect a beginner, intermediate, and advanced to sound like when they're talking about these landforms and waterways or when they're writing about them? So just showing you the difference. And everybody can be on the same topic, but you're differentiating the language. And then this is English language arts, looking at major and minor characters and point of view. And again, what would a beginner, intermediate, and advanced sound like? So what are the supports that you're going to put in place so that the students can now be engaging in that curriculum topic? I've done phys ed as well. EAL is all day and in every subject, and all of our teachers are powerful language teachers. And in these phys ed wellness and art, music, any complementary course, there's so much language and students are often very passionate and interested in it. And so if you're one of those teachers, I encourage you to give lots of language supports as well in your topic area so they can not only enjoy the performative doing parts of those classes, but they also have the language that's commensurate with their skill and their passion and interest. So this is a phys ed example about health and food choices and the lessons around access to food and what beginner, intermediate, and advanced would sound like. I've got an art example. We did some in the benchmarks, we gave some of our examples in the green section. There was one on art as well. And there's so much, again, with every technique and piece of equipment, there's so much language. And we want to have the kid not only be able to use the paintbrush, but be able to talk about the description of that tool and how they use it. And again, music, tons of language in music as well as the skills, and then how do kids communicate their understanding. So looking at opportunities to really think about all the language that's in a particular topic that you teach. And AI is such a fantastic tool as a teacher to be able to use. You still need to have your teacher brain. It does not replace your teacher thinking, but it's a helpful, supportive tool for you to use. You know the outcome, you know your students, you have the information, you can work with it back and forth to get what you need a lot quicker than it is for you thinking and researching it independently. So it'll help you, but you still need to be the one deciding what to do and how to do it, and you're still the filter. But it's a great tool. So more and more people are using AI. I use one called Poe, and I have it to help me do lots of different things. So leveling texts, making comprehension questions and answers, doing vocab work. I get it to generate texts. I get it to, like when we were doing landforms and waterways, I have it produce expository texts for me at different levels. And then I have it write narrative text, and I put kids in my class in the story, and I have AI write a narrative that's using the geography and waterways, and they go on a mystery hunt around. And so I'm recycling that language for kids in a narrative, not just an expository text. So lots of fun things you can do with AI, and it does it very quickly for you because a lot of teachers still make a lot of their own materials. So I just wanted to give some examples that I used AI. I'm not an art teacher or an art major, but when I just started looking at like just pencil and paper drawings and all the different things the teacher might have to talk about, and I put some stuff through AI. So when you're going, I don't know the language, you can use AI to help you. So you can just see the tools, but the shading techniques with drawing. Then perspective. And if you're an art teacher that's on here, you know this work better than I do, but these are all the things you'd be starting to talk about and teach the students in terms of perspective. And then in the aspects of drawing, right, proportion and scale, arrangement, all of these things. So there's so much language just with drawing. I got it to give me verbs and adjectives, adverbs and nouns, and I got it to tell me, okay, if I'm an art teacher and I'm explaining proportion, what am I going to say? So I've got this explanation, and then I could differentiate that explanation too to make it simpler, or I could give kids, a guide on it with visuals. So AI is awesome in terms of helping. And then I also got it to say, now I've taught the kids how to draw, they've got some of the language, they've made a picture, and now I want them to write and tell me about not only what's in their image, but their technique related to these skills I told them. And so here's an example of what a kiddo would say about proportion and scale, etc. So you can use AI to help you think of these things. And also then you could differentiate for beginner, intermediate, and advanced. So a lot of people are already using AI. Over the past 2 years, it's grown exponentially. But when I first started doing this, sometimes people had never even tried it, and they tried it for the very first time in some of the workshops I did. But I know it's more prolific now. So if you're already using it, keep doing it and keep exploring, but always, again, use your own brain and judgment. Anyways, you can see I even got it to do like sentence frames, etc. too. So vocabulary and sentence frames, which is what we're going to talk about next. So typically what I do at this stage in the workshop is I have everybody stop and think about an upcoming unit of study, and you go to the curriculum and you pull up the outcome that you're going to work on, and then you start thinking about the language related to that outcome. So I do want to just pause, and I'm going to set a timer for just 2 minutes to give folks that opportunity to process a little bit. So you have some choices. What are you going to be teaching right away? Where do you have the outcome handy? What's that outcome? What's your learning intention going to be? And what's the language that goes with that outcome? Because I want you to have that language ready as we're starting to talk about then some strategies of how you can teach that language. So think about that. And if you're an administrator, think about maybe a teacher you might be working with and supporting, so that you also have some of this information. So I'll set the timer for 2 minutes for you to just get your heads around something you might be teaching soon and the language of the content. Okay, we'll come back. So hopefully everybody had a chance to either take a bio break or play with AI or identify the language of your content so you have that at the forefront of your mind. Somebody asked a question about any preferred AI platforms. I put in a few in the chat, but if folks have other ones, it's great to kind of pull a master list together of things folks are using. So if you have a great tool you're using or someone else is using, feel free to throw it in. Some, of course, are going to be free and some are going to be subscription. So that's at your discretion, your different tools. So we've thought about our learners. We know our learners' levels. We've got some kind of chart or something we're referring to. We know our curriculum and our unit of study, and we've thought about the language that's related to it. And now we're going to think about some of our tasks. So the one key thing with knowing the different levels is thinking about that just right entry point for learning. So, one of the buzzwords right now is having a unit with multiple entry points for learning. So we know the different levels, we know the kids' skills and aptitudes. So when we're looking at tasks, sometimes the task is going to be at grade level, but the language is going to be modified. And sometimes the task is going to be a building task, a building background knowledge, not yet at grade level. It's a pre, and the language might be modified, or the language might be at the same level as the entry level task. So again, you're going to be thinking about your topic of study and your kids as you're considering these things. And so you want to be at the zone of proximal development. And so most folks are familiar with Vygotsky. It's a constructivist paradigm. And so it's what the green is what kids can do independently. And then, of course, we're learning, so we want to grow. So we want to grow proximally. So our zone is what we can do with the help of a more knowledgeable other. That's you, the teacher, the parent, the peer. Those are the folks that help you grow and learn. If it is too far out of reach, what you can't yet do, or you need too much help, it's not a just right task. And this is the test for you as a teacher. If the kids are still going, ma'am, sir, miss, putting up their hand, then it's outside their reach. It's not something that they can do independently. The class is moving if everybody's in the yellow zone of proximal development and folks are feeling successful because it's what they can do with minimal support. So finding out the ZPD is really, really important, which means, you're going to need to differentiate. And the other thing to put into this is that idea of the gradual release model, right? So the students watch, we do it together, you do it with some help, and you do it alone. So you're moving kids through at the next level skill, you're modeling it for them, you do it together, they do it with you, and then they do it by themselves, or you do it and you support them, and then off they go. And that's what you want to work through, and that has kids grow and grow and grow. Now, not everybody's got the same ZPD. That is the challenge with education. And it doesn't mean having 28 different activities going on in the classroom. It just means that we're all learning about life cycles, but this is the support that I'm going to give this group and this group and this group, and this group's going to have another challenge. So it's not all different things. It's grouping it and organizing it, but you're still working on a common topic or from the unit of study. It's just making sure you have the scaffolds and supports and the adaptations to the task based on your learners. And you have to learn how to manage that in the classroom. So the 4 different types of tasks you have are oral language ones, which are speaking and listening, and then you have reading and writing. And I said this in the last presentation, but oral language is really, really key for all learners. And it's one of the skills that is not taught as much as reading and writing are. And if we improve our oral language instruction and modeling that and the collaborative learning tasks, it will actually help reading and writing improve. So oral language is really key. So for beginners, to get them to talk more, they often need to have the support. So visual aids, the models of the language. Side note, sidebar, interactive read alouds in any grade, in any subject are key. In a bio 30, physics 30, math grade 9, if the teacher reads the problem aloud, talks through it, does a think aloud, that is such great learning. So what's one thing we can all do is have those read alouds, and it's not just about story time or reading a novel. It's reading expository text too, reading that complex social studies article about collectivism, and having the teacher read that and talk about it also really helps kids understand and learn how to read like a historian or read like a mathematician. So sidebar, read alouds are fantastic. Songs and rhymes for beginners, gestures, of course, and routine practice. Intermediates, they can do role-playing, discussion circles, learning the different roles, have storytelling activities, visual organizers, opportunities for feedback with each other, some sentence frames and starters to help them get organized with their thinking. Advanced students, again, debates, presentations, critical reading and discussion, chances to speak public speak more formally, reflection, and then advanced vocabulary lists and advanced mentor texts, etc. I want to show you this video. It's 6 minutes. It is an amazing video that will really have you think about oral language and the importance of oral language. It is in an elementary school, but there's lots of things that you can do with a with junior high from it as well. I'm just going to make sure I'm in the right profile and transition over.
Do a hand up if
Okay. And sorry, I just got to get back to my Zoom and share the sound.
someone in your family comes from somewhere else in the world and has come to live in London. Could you turn to the person next to you and have a discussion about this talking point?
I think Stratford is a better place to live because they're not against anyone and it's... Well, can I just clarify you? What do you mean by, like, against? Like...
What we see is the keystone to everything that happens in the curriculum. And there are such high expectations for talk, and it does really make a difference in the children how articulate and how confident they are.
The vision of School 21 is to prepare young people for the world that they're going to go into in the 21st century. I think one of the biggest barriers to the students we serve really getting on in life is lack of good communication skills. We need to elevate speaking to the same level as reading and writing.
So we have a vote.
What makes me enjoy talking the most is that everybody's listening to you and you're like part of the world and you feel respected and important.
When I'm talking, they're listening what I'm saying, and sometimes they give me questions, or maybe I give them questions.
Every child within this school is expected to speak in every lesson, in every opportunity throughout their school day, and we try and create lots of different contexts for young people to hone their skills as speakers.
Right, so what I want us to do now is to have a discussion about different kinds of culture, and I want us to discuss this. Some cultures are better than others.
I think every teacher, if you say to them, do you talk in your classroom? Of course there's talking in the classroom, but what's different here is the deliberateness of it.
Every teacher needs to have that toolkit of things that they can draw on to bring effective talk into their practice.
We've done a lot of work introducing sentence stems that children can use for different situations, so for agreeing with somebody, for disagreeing politely with someone, for challenging someone.
And while we're doing that, I want you to make sure that you're using some of the sentence stems. So you might say linking to someone's point or build on something that somebody has said.
Building on there. I agree because maybe
The thing that's had the biggest impact on my practice is probably discussion guidelines.
We are going to be discussing why beliefs were important or why they weren't important in ancient Greece. Could anybody remind me about any of our discussion guidelines?
one of them is when someone's not contributing, you have to invite them by asking them a question or saying their name.
Excellent. Why would you do that, Aaron?
Then everyone has an idea.
Everyone gets to share their idea, don't they? Well done.
So discussion guidelines were created in conjunction with the children. These are the 5 or 6 key things that we think make a really good discussion. I've been able to take a step back, and I think that the children take on a larger role within the classroom.
I think it should be Aries and Athena because they're both the god of war.
Yeah, but to challenge your diva, there are lots of fish.
So another key way of promoting oracy in the classroom is to think carefully about the groupings that you use. So whether you're getting them to talk in pairs or in trios or in larger groups.
Sometimes it's best to have students in threes. Sometimes we look at how they can stand in the traverse opposite each other. Each of those different groupings enables a different type of conversation.
If you see inside them, we're all human beings and we're all people.
Our oracy programme is comprehensive. It has to be seen in maths and science and those subjects that traditionally haven't had a talk focus.
There are 24 cookies altogether.
There are 24 cookies altogether.
There are 3 children.
There are 3 children.
All right, let's see if I would say that I'd always encouraged talk in my maths lessons before, but what's changed is that I really plan very carefully for talk, and I model and structure the talk very explicitly.
Okay, so we're going to go and do our talk task.
The talk task, they get to practice what they've done in the new learning, and they're talking through what they're doing. So it's about developing their vocabulary and language of explanation.
We were talking about fractions. We done like 4 circles. And then we needed to share 24 in each group. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Your turn. We were using sentences to help us. 24 shared equally between 4 children is equal to 6. Let's do another.
There are lots of different reasons why we get students who may not feel it's almost their place to speak. So for all those reasons, oracy is an issue of equality, of equity, of social mobility.
Wow, I heard some pretty amazing discussions going on just now. So let's get some feedback from some groups.
Because of the focus on oracy, we've seen our students become much more confident in their ideas. By creating the context and the opportunities for them to speak, they've just flown and become eloquent, engaging speakers.
Hayden?
We came to a decision and said that we disagree with the text. Everyone is unique. Everyone's the same, but they do their things in different ways.
All right, so I don't know how many of you have seen that video before. It's been around for a while. It's one of my favorite ones. I've seen it over 50 times and I get a lot out of it each time, but it's a great video to share with colleagues, etc. I find it really inspirational and aspirational. School 21 is actually a school that has low SES. So even though they're wearing uniforms, it's a low socioeconomic school with high EAL learners. I know we didn't see a lot of the beginners in there, but with their high focus on interaction, collaboration, and that structured talking, it improved their reading, writing, and math skills overall. So talking is the way to go. So it's to me, something you can dabble in and adding and augmenting your practice with quite easily. I'm just going to go back to my PowerPoint and we'll keep trucking along. So with reading, I won't go into a whole bunch of detail here, but I know a lot of folks are doing work with Scarborough's reading rope. And what I really appreciate about it is the word recognition part with phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition is the act of reading, the skill of reading, but all of the stuff that goes into comprehension behind the scenes is really, really critical what teachers are doing to build background knowledge, vocabulary knowledge, the language structures, the verbal reasoning, and the literacy. That all comes with time and exposure to text and in the different genres. So there's the act of actually the skill of reading, but then there's all of the other things that go into comprehension, which also you're building experiences with the live interaction in the classroom as well as when the kids are actually reading words. So that's really, really key. So I really find the reading rope helpful. And again, for beginners, often they're learning to read. They're not at the reading to learn phase, so they might need a lot of decoding supports, etc. Some of your EAL learners will come being able to decode. I can decode in any language that has the same alphabet as us. I can decode. I don't know what I'm reading though. So making sure you're aware, yep, you got that skill, but now we got to work on the meaning of the words. So that comprehension is really important. So there's read alouds for teacher modeling, which I talked about a little bit, asking questions, doing the guided reading where you're working with a group of students and a text or a passage, and mapping out the story so that the beginner learner is showing their understanding by being able to draw it out with pictures or words or sentences. Intermediates, starting to work at those context clues, the multisyllabic words, working through that to be able to read with automaticity, chunking, etc. And then that beginning of that affix analysis, because learning about affixes is a gateway. So you've got the re and the un and the meant and the shun and the ism. And once you understand what those do, then all of a sudden it unlocks exponentially language. So mini lessons sometimes are really, really opportune, and in different subjects lend themselves to different affixes. For example, like a like biotic and abiotic, that a, and the ism in social studies, collectivism. And so there's certain affixes that lend themselves to different subjects too when you come across them. So think about your subject and when it would be appropriate. And again, it's best in context, not like a random grammar lesson pulled out of nowhere. It's when it's happening is that when you would teach that affects. Again, for intermediates, predicting outcomes, discussion and reflection, looking at text features helps kids unlock. Some people don't know how to navigate pages. Different kinds of texts are set up differently. So walking them through some of that. Retelling, great skill, and having kids journal about what they have read is really, really helpful in terms of that accountability for reading and making sure they're remembering things and leading them to go back to and refer to the text. So retelling and taking those notes in journals are great strategies. Advanced kids still need support. So morphological analysis and that contextual vocabulary development are huge. And advanced phonics and word recognition, you can get some pretty complex vocabulary, and learning how to read that anti-disestablishmentarianism word very smoothly. So there's always something for everybody, and of course for English only speakers as well, that are in that advanced language category. They're learning those 3,000 words, how to read them, how to write them. So any of these supports would work for those kids too. And then again, comprehension supports those critical thinking questions, finding the evidence in the text, those kind of analysis things. You can do things like a Socratic seminar, theories, summarization, annotation, lots of different strategies for reading. So when you're thinking about, when you're doing your tasks, when you're building out your lesson, what are the kids going to listen to? What are they going to speak to? What am I getting them to read? And then what am I going to get them to write? So one of the things, this is to give them a leveled text. So this is an example of, for working in living systems, I might have 3 different texts for my kids to read because I know they're at different reading levels. It's all on living systems, and I've got my little reading groups, or they're in mixed reading groups with their passage in front of them so that they can read and understand their text. And that's just a more complex text for living systems. And then looking at the words that they're going to come across. Again, grade 5 has the anatomy that they're doing in the circulatory system. And so some of the kids are not going to be ready for that if they don't know body, chest, hand, and arm yet, let alone understanding the circulatory system and the heart and blood vessels. So it's sometimes you have to build the background knowledge and words before they can start talking about the circulatory system. So that brings us to writing. Just like there's a reading rope, there's a writing rope. Some of you might have seen this as well. And what I really like about this is that there's a section on transcription, the actual act of writing or keyboarding, and then there's the complexities of composition. So you can see in this, there's a lot of opportunities of when you're getting kids to write, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes and kids need a lot of supports. Research from Hetty Roosing, Dr. Hetty Roosing, is a lot on transcription too, and how a lot of kids still need the actual automaticity of printing. They get stuck in the mechanics of printing and writing, and they're putting a lot of energy in actually forming the letters and writing. So that printing practice and handwriting practice and keyboarding practice to get automaticity and fluency is so important. So if you're doing those things in your routines, please keep doing them. And if you haven't, think about adding them, because then when students are working on writing, they're really, really able to focus on the actual content of what they're writing, not the act of writing or the mechanics of writing. So just a little sidebar note there. And again, I'm going to go into a lot of these supports in the next section. So I'm just going to go through this really quickly, and you can refer to them later, because I wanted to get into this last section in our last 15 minutes. Again, this is a really big PowerPoint, so I'm going to go through the next slides quick, but you can refer to this stuff later. It's like a choose your own adventure. So these are 6 of a bigger list of supports for EAL learners. I'm specifically going to hone in on vocabulary supports and sentence structure scaffolds. So there's lots more on the other ones, but this is just narrowing it in so that you can do some vocabulary supports. And there's so many vocabularies. I'm picking 4: visuals, realia, X-point model, graphic organizers, and semantic mappings. I'm just picking 4 to focus on. So visuals is the easiest. I'm not going to belabor visuals. I'd rather spend some time on some more rare things, but getting visuals up on the walls, thinking about what's in your PowerPoint, what's in a video, and what do I need to capture so that students are understanding what the lesson is about. So there's a text here about how it supports learners, but I want to get to some of the samples. So this is the water cycle. These are words that this next one is a mathematical one. Words that mean the same as addition. So kids are building this together. So lots of different ways. I love this one about states of matter, because you can see it's not just about having the words solid, liquid, and gas. There's the particles, there's pictures of water in the different states, then there's properties, and then there's the cycle and the processes. So what is your visual, depending on where you're at with your grade with states of matter? What is a visual that you need commensurate with the outcome that you're learning? Lots of different choices. So again, you can make them with the students, or you can take something from your PowerPoint slide, but what needs to be on the wall. As a school administrator, I was also a phys ed teacher at one point in time. So much language in phys ed. I put bulletin boards in the gym for the purpose of, we had 770 EAL learners who loved phys ed, and I wanted them to learn language too. So in order for the teachers to get the language up on the wall, I had to give them a place to put it so that the kids could not only play badminton really, really well, but they knew the names of the shot. They could give each other feedback. They understood everything. So they needed the visuals to go with it. So making sure you have those visuals. Labeling is another thing to do with visuals. Lots of ideas. Word walls. It doesn't just have to be alphabetical. It can be organized by concept. So think about the visuals in your classroom and how dynamic they are, and they're changing as the learning is happening. Realia is just, the word is in there, real. It's real things. So realia is when you bring the actual thing into the classroom. And we use that a lot in elementary. We use it a lot in science, but in some of the older grades, we can't bring in some of this stuff, but sometimes we do field trips and experience the realia. So realia is a great way to make meaning. X-point model and graphic organizer, probably one of the #1 ways teachers deal with vocabulary, and just having you think about which model you use for which thing. For example, 2-point model, just when there's a lot of adjectives to go with things, properties, you don't need to get into definitions of it necessarily, but you might. So picking and choosing which one. There's nothing worse than having the kids do a 5 to 7-point model for every single word on your vocabulary list. Some of them need something shorter and some of them need something bigger. So concepts and major terms are the ones you want to go deeper with, and then the other ones you might want to do a 3-point model or a 2-point model when you're getting kids to have a lot of vocabulary to go through. So think about what your vocabulary task looks like. Also, there's an opportunity to have the student also write the word in their language as well, like as part of a 6 or 7-point model. So include that as well as a possibility. Graphic organizers, millions of different graphic organizers. The EAL piece for graphic organizers to work is make sure you also say a Venn diagram is 2 overlapping circles. We put what's distinctive about A and B in the outside of the circles and what's similar in the middle. You have to explain sometimes the graphic organizers and what, the fishbone is with the different lines and the branches, making sure you're explaining how to use the graphic organizer and what it actually is. And it's quite challenging sometimes when you actually try to do that. But it helps students because we use graphic organizers so much. But for EAL kids, they also need to know the language of the graphic organizer. Semantic mapping is huge. And if you don't semantic map, it's a great way to have kids understand the relationship for things. And so having kids as an exit slip, build a semantic map about wherever you got to that day with your lesson, mapping it out and hand it in. You can see how they're doing with their understanding. So you can adapt or modify the next day and then hand them back the next day, and the kids can keep adding on as you're building your conceptual understanding. So semantic maps are beneficial. You can see this solid liquid gas one is being built digitally, and it's growing every day as the kids are learning more and more things. This is another one on particles. So semantic mapping, whether digitally or on hand, it's a great way for people to understand not just words in isolation, but how everything relates to each other. And again, for EAL learners, they can also have the English and little notes in their home language as well to help them with their understanding. So just some different examples of those. Then one of my favorite things to do in EAL is word clusters. So earlier there was a map about words that mean the same as addition, like together, etc. So starting to put that helps with the schema, what words go together. So word clusters, like what are natural structures, man-made structure, forces. So lots of examples of word clusters by subject in here for you to look at. One of my favorites, said is dead, right? So how to get kids in their writing use different words besides said, and you build that with kids. As you come across words, you can start building words that you see in context to build their vocabulary, and then when they're writing now, They remember how you put that word up on the wall from the novel you read together, and now they're going to use it in their writing. So expanding that way. Character traits, the same thing. How do you expand on nice? Animals, descriptions, same thing. How do you categorize? So helping kids not just have all of these words, but starting to categorize and organize helps people remember. So there's examples of vocabulary clusters. Then my favorite clines, which some of you might know the word cline, but we use them all the time. So, but you might not know it's called a cline. It might be a cline about speed. So it might be slow, medium, fast, right? So we use them all the time. Fractions, whole, half, quarter, third. So angles. So we use clines all the time. Think about social studies, right? That political spectrum. So it's a great way to teach kids. When I was working with some kids in China last year, they didn't know the word cool and warm. They didn't have those words in English yet. But when they pointed to the words when we were reading together, I said, do you know cold and hot? And they did. So then I did a cline. So then they understood that it was degrees. So then I had the map, just like this one, freezing, cold, cool, warm, hot. And then they got it, right? From the two words that they knew through a cline, I was helping them understand what warm and cool was. So clines are a great thing. And again, clines just kind of happen, and then it's a teachable moment where you can explain it by showing it and so that they understand the relation from something they do know. And now we'll move on to sentence structures in our last 6 minutes. I know this is like super fast. So we're going to go through 4 sentence structure scaffolds: parts, frames, starters, and mentor text. So sentence parts, it's like sentence strips. So you can do, this is a brown dog, cut, 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 and give the kids the words, and they put the words in a sentence. You can substitute words. This is an orange cat. You can do that kind of thing. Or you can have a paragraph and you cut the sentences up, and then the kids put the sentences like topic sentence, conclusion sentence. You can also do it with an essay. Break up the paragraphs, cut them up as a paragraph, and they have to put the paragraphs in order, and the introduction would tell you what order they come in. So for beginners, intermediates, and advanced, you can use the parts or strips as a way to help them understand order and how things go together to make sense. So, and you can also do it digitally as well. It doesn't just have to be like the old school print and cut out and put it in order. You can also do some of this stuff digitally as well. But it helps all levels of students. And then sentence frames. A sentence frame is different than a sentence starter, which we'll talk about next. The starter is just at the start. The frame is the whole sentence. You saw in some of the examples I had sentence frames. Sentence frames is a bigger support than a sentence starter because you have more provided for you and less to fill in. So a sentence frame is a really good helper for beginners, especially, but even for advanced students, as they're dealing with more complex things, a frame might help them as well. So a sentence frame might have 1 or 2 blanks and be a good example of how to do that. So this is because, and you're getting students started on with more detail where they can fill in the blanks either through a word bank or through their own thinking if they're doing some generative writing. So there's some examples of sentence frames. And at all different levels, it can help them. So you can see the advanced ones. The author's use of imagery, suggests or implies, blah, 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 right? So they might need that advanced sentence structure so that they can then use that structure later on their own. You know, if then, again, students might need that for cause and effect. They might need that sentence structure provided for them. Whereas the beginners are more simple. The blank is blank. And there's some examples of those ones filled in. And I used AI to do all of that. So again, I went through sentence frames, examples in language arts, science, social studies, to give you an idea of how you can use it to support whatever it is that you're getting the kids to do. And in all subjects, if they're talking and you're finding they're not talking, they might need these structures. So in that oracy video, they gave them the sentence frames, they gave them so that they were able to talk. So not only did they have the task and the expectation to talk, they were given the structural support so that they could talk. And then over time, that stuff becomes automatized. And then sentence starters. So again, that's at the beginning, and they can be basic or complex sentence starters. So sentence starters are actually harder than a sentence frame, but a sentence starter is very useful, especially for intermediate and advanced. And then there's just some examples of a sentence starter. The most important reason is, another way to say this is, I want to, I can, to the central thesis of the article is that blah, blah, blah. So that's the difference between a starter and a frame. And in all subjects. So again, talking about math and getting kids to write about it, they may need you to provide that sentence starter or sentence frame in order for them to fill out their math journal or write the answer to their problem or explain their thinking or their process in mathematics. And it's a nice evidence for you of their thinking when you're looking at supporting the students. So there's sentence starters in different subjects as examples. And then mentor texts, again, all levels, having that full, complete text in order to be a model for what you're expecting. I was working with a teacher last year in Cambodia, and she had this class in I think it was grade 8 or 9, where they needed to write a persuasive business letter. And she said the kids were struggling with that task. So we talked about what to do. She had half the kids that were struggling, half that could do it. And I said, do they understand the components and the order of doing it? She said, I don't think some of them do. So I said, okay, so for those kids, let's give them the order, and then let's give them a simpler mentor text so that they can look at the example, look at the order unpacked, and make a direct matching. And you can sit there and do that with them. She goes, well, what do I do with the other kids who already know how to do it? You give them another one. They can do it already. Get them going independently. Here's another one for you to analyze, write, do. Here's your problem or case. Now that frees you up. You can go sit at the other table with these kiddos, go through the frame, go through the example, have them match it, and then have them do the task. Once they get going on that, you go to that other group and then debrief with them and work with them on that. So it was, for her, it wasn't, I get what to do with each group, but how do I manage it in my class? And so for you, master teachers or teacher leaders, that's where you can help your peers and the teachers you support in going in sometimes and just modeling the management with some of the differentiation techniques. Because once teachers see it in action, they go, okay, I can do it and manage that class. I know we're just out of time, so I'm going to wind down. So mentor text was the last example. And so I've got a bunch of different scaffolds and supports by each subject at the end, so that you can pick the right ones. So in our this is usually like a 3-hour session, so this is fast. So knowing your learners, step 1, identify your language of your lesson, think about your tasks. What are they reading? What are they writing? What are they doing? Listening and speaking. What's going on there? And then now what are my language supports so that the kids can actually engage in the learning, the comprehension, and then they're going to tell me what they know, or they're going to read and write it down. How is that going down so that the learning task is complete and it's connected to language and the students are supported in that? So we have the survey that I have to stop sharing to copy it and put it in here.
I've put it in the chat already for you, Kathy.
Thank you. Okay. And
You did have a question.
okay.
Diana had asked, you recommended Jerry John's testing, and there's more books. Can you recommend a specific title?
Oh, for reading comprehension? So for reading comprehension, I use Jerry Johns because it goes for K to 12. It's American. No reading test is perfect. So Fontes and Pinnell, PM benchmarks, Dibbles, Acadians, you name it. Nothing's perfect, but they all tell you something. So Jerry Jones does have some American content, but what I like about it is it's pre-K to 12. And there's ABC versions in high school, so you can test like, and the passages are short. You can do a decoding test. So just the words and see what grade they decode. And then you can do a passage for comprehension, expository or narrative, and see what grade they comprehend. So the kiddo reads, retells, and answers questions. And there's one passage per grade. So it's just kind of a quick dipstick, and I can usually get through 2 to 3 passages in 20 minutes. So I can find out approximately what grade the student is comprehending at. And I would do that for kids I'm wondering about, not necessarily every kiddo. If you do a group administered reading test, some people do that. That gives you a grade level, like a CAP 4 or some other ones. That's a group administered test. Or if you're going to do an individually administered one, I use that one because it goes K to 12, and some of the other ones only go to grade 8.
And then Alice had a question. Is there a good resource of sentence frames and starters, or do you generate them using AI?
Yes, because it's got to be related to your content. So it's nothing generic, because it's about, if I'm doing the life cycles and it's an egg, it's a pupa or chrysalis, or pupa, then chrysalis, then it's a caterpillar, then it's a butterfly. I'm probably getting, yeah, I'm wrong. Egg, caterpillar, I said it really wrong. Egg, caterpillar, chrysalis, then butterfly. What are my sentence starters or frames are going to be around that, right? So I'd get AI to generate it based on what you know. Any
Alice,
other questions?
Alice had another question. Is Jerry Johns comparable to Diabells? I don't know.
Dibbles?
Dibbles.
No, they're completely different tests. So Dibbles and Acadians are both group administered reading tests. They're the 3-minute ones, or they have the reading passage where you're looking for reading fluency that they do. So it's a completely different style of tests. I use both though. So we would use Jerry Johns as an individually administered test once a year. And then we would use Dibbles to spot check kids' progress because it's a group administered 3-minute test. And only the kiddos we were wondering about would we then do another Jerry Johns mid-year and end of year. But if kids were at grade level or above, we didn't need to keep testing them. It was the kids that we were monitoring or progressing, then that's why we would use the different tools. So I always like to be as strategic and streamlined as possible with teachers' time. So that's why we do a combination of group administered and individually administered reading assessments. You want to have a variety of tools and know what to pick from when.
Kathy, if I may, it's Diana. I want to go back to my to the question regarding the Jerry Jones testing. I'm looking on Amazon trying to order the book that you were mentioning, and I'm seeing different titles like Basic Reading Inventory. Is that the book?
Yeah, so if you want, Diana, we can email each other offline about that.
Okay.
Just make sure if there's any other questions from folks on here. So if you email me, I can take some screenshots of the one. Because you have to make sure you order the student booklet too. It's coil bound as well as the big book, but it costs less than $100. Yeah. Nicole said, would you share the examples of beginner writing speaking with the kids as an example? So again, when creating that classroom culture and inclusion, I would share examples of different writing, and sometimes allowing kids to pick. Here are some different supports for your writing today. Which one is going to help you? And you don't even need to say it's beginner, intermediate, and advanced. You can just put them out there, and kids will hopefully gravitate to the one they need. Sometimes you can be more overt depending on the kid's age. Again, being very careful with labels and all of those kinds of things. But in a differentiated classroom, I know the kids have an awareness, just like when there's book carts and there's A to J, and kids know who's an F and that it's higher than a D. So it's negotiating and managing that. But we want all kids to feel good and that everyone can learn and everybody's getting what they need. You know, we all have different strengths, you know, coming from that place. What do you like about the AI2 Po? It was just the first AI tool I started to use, and yeah, and so I'm just more familiar with it, and I do a lot of work with it because I have a lot of tacit knowledge about EAL, and so when I'm using it, it doesn't always give me what I need. So I work back and forth with it a lot. You know, giving it a different answer, a different response, trying to get what I need. Like you still need your brain and your knowledge. And when I'm working with a curriculum area, I might be doing some research in the background to try and get it to give me what I need. And then when it gives it, I know I need it more simple, more basic, and I might type in some other things. So I'm not just like asking it something, accepting what it gives me verbatim, plugging it into something I'm doing for kids. I'm going back and forth with it and getting it to do what I need, but it's way faster than me doing it by myself. It's a great helper, but I'm still working quite hard to get it to do what I need and filtering it with what I know about kids and what I want and need. I hope that helps because it's not perfect, but it's a great helper. Any
Kathy,
other
I didn't know
questions?
whether you wanted me to put I have your APLC email. Did you
Yeah.
want your other email in the chat or?
Oh no, that's fine.
Okay.
Any other questions out there, or we can close out the meeting room?
If anybody has a question, they want to just quickly unmute. Oh. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.
Oh, this was all recorded.